The non-avian dinosaurs were one of the most iconic and dominant groups of animals to ever roam the Earth. They were responsible for producing the largest terrestrial carnivores and herbivores of all time, and while sheer size played a significant role in their success, their reign was not just about being massive. These creatures were incredibly diverse in the tools and adaptations they developed, giving them the ability to thrive in a wide range of environments, from razor-sharp claws to heavily armored bodies, from lightning-fast sprinters to lumbering giants. Their evolutionary innovations helped them establish one of the longest-known dynasties in the history of life on Earth. Their rule spanned an astonishing 150 million years, shaping ecosystems in ways that can still be seen in the fossil record today. This period was so profoundly marked by their presence that an entire geological era has been dedicated to them, the Mesozoic, which encompasses the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods. For this reason, the Mesozoic is often referred to as the Age of Dinosaurs. However, despite the sheer dominance that dinosaurs would later achieve, there was actually a time during this era, specifically in the early and middle Triassic, when they were not the rulers of the planet. In fact, for a significant portion of this time, dinosaurs had not even evolved yet, and even after they first emerged, they spent millions of years struggling to find their place, living in the shadows of other, more established predators. Just as mammals would later be forced to live under the rule of the dinosaurs, the early dinosaurs themselves had to compete against a group of formidable creatures who, for a time, were the true apex predators of their world. These dominant predators were the Rauisuchians, fearsome, large-bodied reptiles that took the concept of ferocity to new heights. Unlike dinosaurs, Rauisuchians belonged to a different evolutionary branch within the same broader reptilian group, the Archosauria. While dinosaurs and their modern-day relatives, birds, belonged to the avian line Archosaurs, Rauisuchians were part of the Pseudosuchians, the same lineage that would eventually give rise to crocodilians. In essence, these creatures were distant cousins of dinosaurs, but they were also their greatest rivals, beasts that for a time ruled the land and outcompeted the earliest members of the dinosaur lineage in nearly every environment they shared. It is believed that Rauisuchians first appeared around 249 million years ago during the early Triassic period. Today, paleontologists recognize at least 39 different genera belonging to this group. While they were an incredibly diverse assemblage, most Rauisuchians shared several key characteristics. They were large, they were powerful predators, and they typically walked on 4 muscular legs. That said, there were some fascinating exceptions to these general rules, and not all Rauisuchians fit neatly into a single category. Because of this, scientists now classify them as a paraphyletic group, meaning that while they share common features, they do not form a single, well-defined evolutionary lineage. But one thing is certain: these creatures were some of the most terrifying land predators the world has ever seen. In terms of sheer size, Rauisuchians were some of the closest land predators to ever approach the enormous statures later achieved by the giant theropod dinosaurs such as Tyrannosaurus rex. Many species measured between 13 to 20 feet, 4 to 6 meters in length, making them comparable in size to the largest crocodiles alive today. However, some of these predators grew even larger. One of the most well-known Rauisuchians, Postosuchus, was an apex predator of its time, reaching an estimated 23 feet, 7 meters in length. This massive reptile dominated its ecosystem, standing at the very top of the food chain. But incredibly, even Postosuchus was surpassed in size by some of its close relatives, such as Saurosuchus and Prestosuchus, which reached astonishing lengths of up to 25 feet, 5 meters. To put that into perspective, these creatures were larger than any land-dwelling mammalian carnivore that has ever lived, including the infamous short-faced bear or the massive saber-toothed cats of the Ice Age. Thanks to their size and power, Rauisuchians were nearly always the most dangerous predators in any Triassic ecosystem, far outclassing any predatory dinosaurs of the time. In some regions, they were not just the largest carnivores, they were the dominant force in the food web altogether. This was especially true in the early Triassic, a time when large herbivorous animals were relatively rare due to the aftermath of the massive extinction event that had wiped out much of life on Earth. With fewer large plant-eaters to hunt, Rauisuchians adapted to become hypercarnivores, using their immense strength and speed to take down whatever prey they could find. However, despite their dominance, Rauisuchians would eventually meet their match. Ironically, it was not when they were the biggest creatures in their ecosystems that they reached their evolutionary peak. In fact, the largest Rauisuchian of all time only emerged after the group had already started losing its dominance. This behemoth, Phaseolasuchus, is still considered the largest non-dinosaurian terrestrial predator to have ever walked the Earth. It lived in what is now northwestern Argentina during the Nourian stage of the Triassic period, where it ruled with an iron grip. Even smaller specimens of Phaseolasuchus were thought to have been larger than nearly every other Rauisuchian ever discovered, with the largest individuals reaching an estimated 33 feet, 10 meters in length, and weighing over 3.1 tons. To put that in perspective, this would make it larger than some of the most famous theropod dinosaurs, such as Allosaurus, and close in size to the mighty T-Rex itself. Theropods, such as Gorgosaurus, Majungasaurus, and Carnotaurus, just to name a few, were some of the most fearsome predators to ever walk the Earth. However, it is important to mention that despite their reputation, even these formidable hunters paled in comparison to one of the most massive land predators ever to exist, the mighty Phaseolasuchus. With its staggering size, Phaseolasuchus was not just significantly larger than any predatory mammal to have ever evolved. It was also bigger than nearly every terrestrial carnivore that emerged after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs. To put that into perspective, the largest post-dinosaur predator, Baurasuchus, was barely more than half its weight. This meant that in its time and environment, Phaseolasuchus was the undisputed ruler, a true apex predator. Everything in its ecosystem, including a variety of early dinosaurs such as Coloratosaurus and Zupaisaurus, had to bow to its dominance. The time Phaseolasuchus roamed the Earth, dinosaurs had already existed for approximately 13 million years. Although they had not yet claimed the throne as rulers of the planet, they had already undergone significant diversification. Among these, early dinosaurs were the sauropodomorphs, which, perhaps unsurprisingly, became a key food source for Phaseolasuchus. One of their most basal representatives, Lesomsaurus, was likely one of its primary prey items. This was no small feat, as Lesomsaurus itself was a massive creature, weighing around 7 tons. In nature, large prey often leads to the evolution of even larger predators, and Phaseolasuchus was no exception. Evidence suggests that Phaseolasuchus grew at an astonishingly rapid rate. Studies conducted on its fossilized bones indicate a growth pattern similar to that of other Rauisuchians, and remarkably, these growth rates were often even faster than those observed in early dinosaurs. This rapid growth would have given it yet another competitive advantage over its prey, allowing it to reach enormous proportions in a relatively short span of time. But sheer size was not its only weapon. Paleontologists believe that Phaseolasuchus would have relied heavily on its massive skull, an imposing structure roughly the size of a human being. Within this enormous head were large, sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. These teeth were not just large, they were highly specialized for delivering devastating wounds. By ripping off huge chunks of meat, Phaseolasuchus inflicted massive blood loss and shock upon its victims, ensuring a swift and brutal kill. This method of predation was not unique to Phaseolasuchus but was characteristic of Rauisuchians as a whole. Even though not all members of this group were as colossal, they were all highly efficient hunters. Their teeth were distinctively long, extremely sharp, and slightly curved, qualities that made them function almost like sabers. This design allowed Rauisuchians to inflict enormous damage with minimal effort, a trait that set them apart from many early dinosaurs and made them formidable opponents in their environment. One of the best-studied Rauisuchians, Saurosuchus, helps illustrate just how lethal these creatures were. This behemoth was one of the largest and most fearsome members of its group, boasting a head roughly the length of a medium-sized dog. Surprisingly, recent research has suggested that its bite force was not particularly strong, comparable to that of a modern gharial, a crocodilian specialized for catching fish rather than crushing bones. However, thanks to the highly effective slicing ability of its teeth, Saurosuchus was still able to maintain its position as the apex predator of its ecosystem. Rather than relying on brute strength to crush its prey, it likely used its teeth to shear through flesh with ease. The only drawback to this strategy was that it might have left behind meat that was too tough to tear apart. Despite some Rauisuchians displaying relatively weak bite forces, not all of them shared this trait. Emerging research suggests that each species had its own unique adaptations, resulting in a variety of feeding techniques. While some were built for tearing through large, tough prey, others may have been better suited for hunting smaller, softer-bodied animals. This diversity in feeding strategies allowed Rauisuchians to prey on nearly every type of animal that existed during the Triassic, from dinosaurs to dicynodonts, non-archosaur reptiles, and even other pseudosuchians. Beyond their size and predatory prowess, Rauisuchians possessed another major advantage over early dinosaurs: armor. Much like their modern-day crocodilian descendants, Rauisuchians were equipped with osteoderms, bony deposits that formed protective plates along their bodies. These were primarily positioned along their backs, necks, and sometimes even the tops and undersides of their tails. Compared to other animals with osteoderms, Rauisuchians had exceptionally thick armor, thicker in fact than what is seen in modern crocodiles. This was an extreme level of protection, as crocodiles today are already known for their impressive resistance to cuts, slashes, and abrasions. The arrangement of these osteoderms varied among different species. Some Rauisuchians had their armor, plates arranged in one or two neat rows, while others displayed a more asymmetrical pattern. This irregular arrangement may have served a social function, potentially allowing individuals to recognize one another. Additionally, Rauisuchian armor came in an astonishing variety of shapes and sizes. For example, Prestosuchus had osteoderms that were heart-shaped, though these were certainly not meant for spreading love. Their primary function, of course, was defense. Interestingly, despite their dominance, it is hypothesized that Rauisuchian armor was not meant to deter dinosaurs or other archosaurs, but rather to protect against attacks from their own kind. This makes sense when considering that the thickest osteoderms were typically concentrated on their upper bodies, areas that would have been inaccessible to most predators except for other Rauisuchians. This suggests that in addition to hunting, Rauisuchians also had to compete fiercely with one another, sometimes resorting to violent confrontations to establish dominance. However, not all Rauisuchians were heavily armored. A small number of them evolved with tougher, more flexible skin instead. One such example is Yarasuchus, a relatively smaller member of the group that lived in what is now China. Due to its more lightweight and nimble skeletal structure, it may not have needed heavy armor, as it relied on speed and agility to evade predators and hunt prey. Another example is Arizonosaurus, which, as its name suggests, lived in what is now Arizona. However, unlike its heavily armored relatives, it had a different set of adaptations, which we will explore next. When you first lay eyes on this fascinating archosaur, the absence of bony armor, known as osteoderms, might not be the first thing that catches your attention. Instead, your focus is likely to be drawn to something far more striking: its enormous sail. Yes, just like certain dinosaurs, some members of the group known as Rauisuchians, or Rians for short, evolved impressive sails on their backs, in what is considered a remarkable case of convergent evolution. This phenomenon likely arose as a response to the extreme climate conditions of the Triassic period. Back then, global temperatures were significantly higher than they are today, estimated to be nearly twice as warm, so scientists believe these sails may have played a crucial role in thermoregulation, helping these creatures regulate their body temperature under the scorching prehistoric sun. However, keeping cool may not have been the only advantage of these elaborate structures. Another widely accepted theory suggests that these sails also served an important role in social displays, helping these Rauisuchians communicate with one another. Whether it was for attracting mates, intimidating rivals, or establishing dominance, these sails undoubtedly made their owners stand out, and they were not alone in this evolutionary experiment. Several other Rauisuchians, such as Tenosuchus, Brasilosuchus, and Hypsilorhacus, also evolved similar features, adding to the diversity of these Triassic giants. But Rauisuchians were not just about dramatic sails and towering figures. The group as a whole was incredibly diverse, encompassing species with a variety of lifestyles and adaptations. Take, for instance, the bizarre Chanarasuchus. Unlike its sail-backed relatives, it did not have an enormous ridge protruding from its spine. Instead, it was semi-aquatic, a trait that made it a true outlier among its kind. In fact, Chanyarasuchus is considered the only Rauisuchian with strong evidence of being well adapted for life in the water, despite the fact that many members of its group had vaguely crocodile-like features. Fossilized tail remains suggest that this species had a laterally compressed tail, tall and narrow like an oar, along with elongated neural spines, all of which indicate a powerful ability to propel itself through aquatic environments. Other adaptations that hint at its amphibious lifestyle include reduced dermal armor, which likely made movement in the water more efficient, and an elongated neck that may have helped it snatch fish with ease. Yet, despite these aquatic tendencies, Chanyarasuchus still retained relatively unspecialized legs, meaning it was just as capable of walking on land as it was of navigating the waters. Fortunately for any hypothetical time travelers, Chanyarasuchus was not among the largest predators of its era. Unlike modern crocodilians, which dominate freshwater ecosystems, this Rauisuchian preferred to inhabit the shallow coastal seas of the Triassic, where it likely filled a niche similar to that of early marine reptiles like the Dinosaurs. And, speaking of Dinosaurs, it is worth noting that despite their visual similarities, these creatures were not closely related to Rauisuchians at all. Instead, they belonged to an entirely different group of marine reptiles, proving once again that the Triassic period was a golden age for convergent evolution, where different species often ended up resembling one another due to similar environmental pressures. But perhaps one of the most surprising cases of Rauisuchian evolution was the emergence of species that bore an uncanny resemblance to theropod dinosaurs. Now, you may remember that most Rauisuchians were quadrupedal, walking on all fours like modern crocodiles. However, some members of this group decided to break that mold entirely, evolving bipedal locomotion. Examples of these two-legged Rauisuchians include Shuvosaurus, Ephigia, Poposaurus, and Silosuchus. And it was not just their upright stance that made them look so dinosaur-like. These species also had reduced hands, hip structures similar to certain theropods, and skull shapes that made them even more reminiscent of the meat-eating dinosaurs that would later dominate the Mesozoic. For a long time, paleontologists were actually convinced that some of these creatures were early theropods. It was only through closer examination of their distinctive ankle joints and the way their legs connected to their bodies, a feature known as the pillar erect stance, that scientists realized they were, in fact, Rauisuchians and not dinosaurs at all. Curiously, none of these theropod-like Rauisuchians lived alongside fully evolved dinosaurs. Instead, they coexisted with primitive dinosaur ancestors, some of which were also experimenting with bipedalism. Yet, true to Rauisuchian form, these creatures took this evolutionary path to the extreme. While some of the bipedal species, like Ephigia and Poposaurus, remained relatively small, others grew to astonishing sizes. The most impressive example of this was undoubtedly Silosuchus, a giant among Rauisuchians that could rival the size of the monstrous Phaseolosuchus. Fossil evidence suggests that fully grown Silosuchus individuals may have reached lengths of up to 10 meters, or 33 feet, standing at an imposing height of around 2.5 meters, about 8 feet tall. With such massive proportions, it was eerily similar in size to the much later theropod baryonyx, making it one of the largest bipedal Rauisuchians ever to exist. However, despite its towering stature, Silosuchus was nowhere near as heavy as Phaseolosuchus. Due to its more lightly built skeleton, estimates place its weight at around 2 tons, a significant figure, but still much less than the true giants of its time. Nevertheless, the fact that a Rauisuchian could reach such sizes while walking exclusively on 2 legs is a testament to just how varied and adaptable these creatures were. They dominated the Triassic in ways that few other groups could, occupying nearly every available niche and developing an astonishing range of body plans, from crocodile-like quadrupeds to sail-backed predators to theropod-mimicking bipeds. And while their reign eventually came to an end, their legacy would live on in their distant relatives, the mighty dinosaurs and the crocodilians that still roam the planet today. Furthermore, it was not even the most formidable rukkan in its ecosystem. In fact, it broke yet another fundamental rule of its kind, its diet. While the majority of Ryans were hypercarnivores, meaning they primarily fed on meat, this particular species was an exception. Instead of sharp, flesh-tearing teeth, it had a toothless beak, which was specially adapted for shearing leaves off trees. This made it one of the few herbivorous Ryans
a truly unique deviation from the norm, and it was not alone. Other bipedal genera, such as Idea, were also herbivores, showing that this unusual dietary adaptation was not entirely unheard of within the group.
On the other hand, Papasaurus was very much a dedicated carnivore. It was likely a fast and agile hunter, resembling small predatory theropods in both its build and hunting strategy. Interestingly, for those who have watched Walking with Dinosaurs, another potential two-legged carnivore was Prostosuchus. There has been some debate among paleontologists regarding its stance. Some believe it was fully committed to bipedalism, while others argue that it was more of a facultative biped, meaning it could switch between walking on 2 legs and 4 depending on the situation. The evolution of bipedalism among rheans may have provided several advantages. One major benefit could have been improved vision, allowing these creatures to spot prey or potential threats from a greater distance. Another possibility is that standing upright aided in locomotion, giving them an efficient way to move across their environment. However, that is not to say that the quadrupedal rheans were at a disadvantage. Some of them may seem at first glance to resemble oversized crocodiles, but there is a key distinction. These apex predators were predominantly terrestrial. Unlike modern crocodiles, which have legs that splay out to the sides, rhean limbs were positioned directly beneath their bodies, providing them with a more upright stance. This anatomical feature made them highly efficient walkers and even capable runners on land. Fossilized tracks discovered in Europe, attributed to the rhean Ticinosuchus, suggest that it could reach speeds of approximately 12 kilometers per hour, or 7 miles per hour. This is slightly faster than the average human jogging speed, and fast enough to catch many of the smaller animals that roamed the Triassic landscapes. However, there is still uncertainty about whether these tracks represent an animal at full sprint or just moving at a brisk walking pace, meaning it is possible that some rheans could have achieved even greater speeds. Additionally, in most rheans, the front limbs were significantly shorter and more lightly built compared to the hind limbs. Even among fully quadrupedal species, this reinforced the idea that these creatures were built for agility rather than brute strength. They were not sluggish, lumbering land crocodiles, but rather fast, powerful, and versatile predators. This combination of diverse locomotion styles, varying body sizes, an array of specialized teeth, and even armor plating made rheans the undisputed rulers of the Triassic. They dominated the prehistoric landscapes, long before dinosaurs rose to prominence. However, dinosaurs were not always under their rule. As mentioned earlier, dinosaurs had not yet evolved during the earliest part of the Triassic. Current estimates suggest that the first true dinosaurs appeared around 233 million years ago, approximately 16 million years after the rheans had already established themselves as top predators. This head start gave rheans a significant evolutionary advantage. As the saying goes, first come, first served. Even so, dinosaurs managed to make remarkable progress in a relatively short bit of time. Some early theropods, such as Herrerasaurus and Gogyrosaurus, reached impressive sizes, growing up to 6 meters (20 feet) in length. Despite their rapid evolutionary success, however, they were still far from overthrowing the rheans. These early dinosaurs coexisted with much larger and more powerful adversaries, including the massive Phaseolosuchus, one of the dominant rhean predators of the time. Fossil evidence clearly shows that rheans were still the top predators in most Triassic ecosystems. In fact, dinosaurs typically accounted for only a small fraction of the total animal population within their environments, often making up no more than 10%. Large carnivorous dinosaurs in particular were especially rare during this period. On the other hand, smaller dinosaurs fared better. One of the most successful early theropods was Cullophysis, a lightweight, fast-running predator about the size of an Australian cattle dog. Its speed and agility allowed it to establish a niche that was not yet dominated by larger rheans. Theropods and dinosaurs in general also seem to find some success in cooler environments where rheans were less common. However, even in these colder regions, at least 1 or 2 genera of rheans could usually be found occupying the role of apex predator. Their widespread dominance was largely due to the arrangement of the continents at the time. During the Triassic, the Earth's landmasses were fused together into the supercontinent Pangaea, which allowed rheans to spread across nearly every region of the world. As a result, fossil remains of these creatures have been discovered on every continent except Antarctica. Back then, the world was vastly different from the one we know today. In addition to the supercontinent Pangaea, much of the planet's climate and geography were dramatically altered. The dominance of Rians was not just a result of their evolutionary advantages. It was also a product of the environment they inhabited. However, as history would soon show, even the mightiest rulers do not reign forever. Change was coming, and it would eventually set the stage for the rise of the dinosaurs. Back in the Triassic, the world was a vastly different place from what we know today. Imagine a planet where much of the land was covered in what can only be described as a super desert, a vast, arid landscape with only the occasional river or lake breaking up the dryness. For the dominant rulers of this era, the Rukians, this extreme environment was not an obstacle, but an advantage. These formidable creatures thrived where others struggled, taking full control over dwindling water sources whenever drought struck, which, back then, was an all-too-common occurrence. Fossil evidence strongly suggests that during these times of environmental hardship, Rukian populations did not dwindle like other species, but instead surged. Their ability to outlast competition in harsh conditions likely played a major role in their success. Some paleontologists believe that their dominance was not solely due to their physical prowess, but also to their social behavior. Evidence for gregarious tendencies, meaning they lived and operated in groups, has been found in species like the Dasychus, whose fossils were discovered in clusters, with one remarkable find containing the remains of 9 individuals together. This suggests that cooperation may have been key to their survival, allowing them to control resources, hunt more effectively, and perhaps even protect each other from threats. With so many advantages on their side, it seemed like nothing could stand in the way of the Rukians. Their reign over the prehistoric world appeared unshakable, and dinosaurs, who were still relatively new on the scene, seemed destined to remain in the background, never rising beyond their modest role in the ecosystem. If time travelers had visited Earth at that point, they would have probably placed all their bets on the Rukians continuing to rule indefinitely. But nature is unpredictable, and history is full of ironic twists. Just as the dinosaurs' fate would be sealed by a mass extinction event at the end of the Cretaceous, it was another mass extinction that gave them their golden opportunity in the first place. This often overlooked catastrophe was the Triassic-Jurassic extinction, one of the 5 great die-offs in Earth's history. Scientists estimate that this devastating event occurred around 201.4 million years ago, wiping out a massive percentage of life on Earth. While the exact details remain a subject of ongoing research, the leading theory points to one of the largest volcanic events in Earth's history, the eruption of the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, or CAMP for short. This was no ordinary volcanic activity. It was a period of colossal eruptions that spanned an astonishing 600,000 years, unleashing 4 separate pulses of destruction. The effects were catastrophic. Massive lava flows covered an area larger than modern-day Canada, while immense amounts of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide were pumped into the atmosphere, triggering climate chaos, ocean acidification, and ecosystem collapse. For the once dominant Rukians, this was the beginning of the end. Entire lineages that had ruled the planet for tens of millions of years vanished seemingly overnight. They had survived droughts, adapted to harsh conditions, and even outcompeted the earliest dinosaurs, but they could not withstand the sheer magnitude of this extinction event. One by one, every single known genus of Rukians disappeared, leaving a void at the top of the food chain. And who was there to step in and claim that vacant throne? The dinosaurs. Why did they survive when the Rukians did not? That question still puzzles scientists today. One prevailing theory suggests that dinosaurs were already better suited to sudden climate shifts. While Rukians had dominated the warmer, drier regions of Pangaea, many dinosaurs had found their niche in cooler environments. This may have given them an edge when volcanic winters and rapid climate fluctuations devastated other species. Another theory proposes that the structure of their respiratory system, similar to that of modern birds, allowed them to cope better with low oxygen conditions, which were a likely consequence of the massive volcanic upheavals. Whatever the reason, the extinction of the Rukians paved the way for the age of dinosaurs. From that point forward, these once small and relatively inconspicuous creatures began to diversify, grow, and spread across the planet, eventually evolving into the iconic giants we all recognize today. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction did not just mark the end of an era, It set the stage for one of the most fascinating and successful dynasties in Earth's history, the dinosaurs. And just like that, the rulers of the Triassic were no more. The world had changed, and the future belonged to a new breed of giants.